Hey, Om. So yeah, we'll kick off with a round of introductions and then we'll get into the main topic today, which is to talk about focus groups and really the benefits of them today for both market research firms and user research firms, specifically games user research. And I'll start off by introducing myself and then we'll hop into an introduction from you. So I'm Jack Dunn. I'm the head of research operations here at PlaytestCloud. Been at PlaytestCloud for almost 5 years and have seen us go from a strictly unmoderated platform to a platform that is really excited about adding more and more moderated games user research tools to its arsenal. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. And Om, if you want to get us started with your intro, we'll take it from there.
Thanks for inviting me, Jack. Really excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Om Tandon. I currently work as a games UX director for my own consultancy, UX reviewer. I've been in the gaming industry for 16 years, and I've built UX, UR, and market research teams in companies like Wildlife Studios, Digit Games from Scopely, and Gameloft. I'm really passionate about user psychology and techniques of user research, and it's a great opportunity today to share something about what I felt or what I went through while working in the field, and learn from your experiences as well, Jack.
So you're a busy man, Om, right? You don't stop, you don't take breaks.
Currently I'm consulting, so you can call that.
Cool. Well, let's hop into discuss a little bit about focus groups and like maybe some stuff that we've done in the past. Where should we start on this one? Should we start with talking about maybe talking about some specifics? So
yeah, I would say maybe we can ask the question of like, what are focus groups and why do we even need them, with so many user research techniques around, if you think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's get a little definition. Let's put a focus group in a box and try to contain it there for the next 20 minutes, half an hour. So yeah, how would you define a focus group?
Yeah, so for me, Jack, focus group is a very powerful technique. It's getting potential users of a product you are either building, which is not out in the market, to inviting a group of people who might be actual users of your product into a room or into a setting where you can ask them questions about their needs, desires, motivations, current pain points, anything which can influence the trajectory of your product. And yeah, I think it's a discovery phase kind of a technique. That's one way to use it very early on, when you have just an inkling of what your product could be, but you're not sure about it. So very early on, you can load a technique like focus group, and it's essentially trying to get a sense of the kind of people you think will use your product. Do they really think they will use the product? Do they have a need for it? And if not, what do they expect from it? And again, I've also found it to be used effectively in products which are live, where something might be wrong, your quant data, qual data is not telling you, or maybe something is wrong, but you're just not getting enough details. I think that's another use case where I've used focus groups to learn more about our products and competitor products.
Okay, cool. And how do you go about making sure that the people in that focus group are the right people, that there's a good spread in there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think for me, so before I get into that, I would say, I'm a big believer in, quant user research techniques, qual user research techniques. I work with both quant data, qual data, like many of us out there. We know analytics is really big in games industry and software. And I've had my fair amount of success using just, qual techniques, because, with quant data, there's always the problem of budget, time, getting the right number of people. And the biggest task is analysis if it has to be done manually. So with focus group, I think with any qual technique, and more specifically focus group, for me, the number on the top of the list is recruiting the right candidates, because if you go wrong there, that's step one, or I would say zero, then your entire foundation is gone, Ori. And then I would put the moderator, the person who will moderate, their experience, how well they conducted, they're good at moderating the group without biasing it. I think that would be, I would still put recruiting before finding a person who can moderate it. And I think for that, I would rely, if you have internally that data, well and good, but in my experience, I've always relied on external agencies At the market research or even agencies like PlaytestCloud, we've had the opportunity to work together. Not endorsing, I'm endorsing them, but basically I'm saying in general, I work with a lot of agencies. All I'm saying is, I think it's always good to have a third-party recruitment agency. So you're not biasing the data. They know more about the database, player database than you after they've collected the requirement. I think that's a good place to start if you know nothing about your users.
Yeah, I think that's something that we see a lot actually, and that's another recommendation I will often have for studios. So if they come to me and they say, "Hey, I need people that are," and they'll give me some telemetry numbers. They'll give me something like, "Hey, they played X amount of hours in my game, reached this level," and all of those type of really specific things. I'll say, "Hey, you know that, and I don't." Right? Like you have that in your back end, so you reach out to them. But when you need the folks to come in and do maybe some competitor analysis or some research on a competitor title or a different theme where you don't want your own people in there, that's when, a service like us comes in much handier and much faster. I think it's a problem a lot of leaders in different studios have expressed to me, that when they're trying to get people that don't play their games into their research studies, they just like 3x the amount of time it takes, and there isn't the same type of internal drive to get there as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Jack, in my experience, I think nowadays with most companies having community channels and special
big Discords,
VIP support, I have found it from my experience working with some multi-million-dollar franchises and companies. It's always easier to find your VIP players because they're already subscribed. But then as a user research group, it also becomes your job to tell the product stakeholders, guys, we have access to them, but that's not the whole gamut of, the entire pool of players that we are looking at. So I think what I have found is we always want to have in our group, depending on what the topic is, if it's for your own game, a good mix of your VIP players who might be your high spenders or highly engaged players. But then you also want this another group, and they are the ones hard to get. Even if you ask them, "Hey, player ID so and so, can you talk to us?" Chances are they won't. And then there are players who have churned. There's no way to get to them. So I think that's where you guys have a much more wider and unbiased pool from where to pick from, especially to get a good even spread in your focus group of engaged players, non-engaged players, non-paying VIP players. Yeah, that's another thing I've always found with third-party recruitment.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't always considered that actually. I do forget sometimes that it's kind of hard to get in touch with the people that don't play the game anymore. Cool. Well, let's talk about the logistics of a focus group. So how would we set one up? Who are the number of people that we'd have in it? I suppose in your experience, like scheduling backups as well. I can talk a little bit about how we do that in the more remote environment as opposed to the in-person stuff. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think from a number of people kind of, best practices, I think anywhere between 6 to 8 work. You don't want to go below 6, and you can go from 8 to 10, but the bigger the group, more difficult it becomes for everybody to express themselves. If you're looking at a larger group, my advice is, split it. My general rule of thumb is we aim at 8. That's our optimal number. Can be one down, can be one more. That has happened actually. Sometimes another person have appeared, and we are more than welcoming. We have to accommodate on the fly. And remember, the session time usually, just not to fatigue the entire group, is between 60 to 90 minutes. So in that time, 8 people expressing themselves. And it's again, I think it's more of a conversation. So, you want to give enough room that people can express individual opinion, but then they're also, talking in groups, validating, agreeing, disagreeing with others. So I think that's a good number. If you need more data points, do multiple focus groups. But over to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for me, it's the scheduling side of things, right? So I want to make sure that enough people show up at the same time. And let's say if we're aiming for 8, we'll often invite, maybe 10, right, to show up. And then we'll actually filter them out just before they get in. We'll say, hey, you're actually scheduled in as a backup. We pay them for their time as well, give them the full reward for the study, and then let them move on. So the moderator doesn't get overwhelmed. We never want a moderator to end up having somewhere between 2 and 4 more people than they were expecting. especially if that could change, let's say, the target of the focus group. Let's say the additional 2 people that show up are part of a different target audience, or have a different experience with the game or product that we're talking about. So we don't want to shift the conversation too much in that direction. And that's another great thing about the remote side of things, is it's much easier to not let people in, kick people out, or talk to them privately as well, right? So when you're in this kind of remote setting, you can use any of the direct messaging features that you'll find on the platform like Zoom or something. And yeah, it just gives them a little nudge that maybe it's time to let someone else speak. Are there any techniques that you employ to get people to talk more in a focus group?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jack. And again, like as you mentioned, and probably we'll deep dive into it, with COVID and everything, there was an opportunity. I've taken part in, the live ones where you actually invite people in a room, in a research facility, which is great. But with COVID, we had, also remote opportunities. But yeah, I think that's also something worth discussing because there are pros and cons. But let me come back to what you asked. Yeah, I think there will always be, it's human nature, you'll always get people who are a bit more enthusiastic than the others, especially, if sometimes we have asked we've got people who are, influencers or streamers, and you can see their personality. It's very dominating. We didn't ask
microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, but because, it turns out in the pool, it meets the requirement. Sometimes maybe you are targeting those kind of personalities, or it's a strong clan leader, if it's about social media. So you don't have control over that. I mean, you can specify, but I'm saying generally that's not what we are looking for. We are looking for a wide spread of personality. So everybody will turn up: extrovert, introvert, shy. So as you said, the biggest thing that, you have to watch out, one of the biggest things is like, no one person is, kind of dominating the show. It shouldn't be about, I am here, so I have to speak the most and then I appear most intelligent, because that mentality is there. If you've gone to conferences and there's a speaker group, there are people like, if I'm not speaking, maybe I'm going to appear dumb. What have I contributed? And trust me, that's normal. That happens in any group gathering. But as a moderator, you have to be aware of that. And the techniques that we use is like, basically first is like prompting. When a question comes up, if nobody's speaking, you are going to say, hey, why don't you start? You let people naturally find who's taking the first step. But if you see the same person talking again and again, when you ask a question, you can immediately say, hey, instead of Jack, John, let's hear from you. We haven't heard from you. So as a moderator, you're almost like a guide, taking a tour around, and you're like, so what do you think about it? We haven't heard from you. Do you have any opinions, And if there are people who are talking more than they're supposed to, there are a couple of well-known body language techniques, without being rude, because you don't want to, you cannot make eye contact with them, which works very well in a live setting, but on a Zoom, it could be tricky because you can have up to 8 people on your screen. So that time, I think so there are steps of what we call levels of intervention. So first level of intervention is, okay, you are deliberately asking someone else for opinion rather than the same person taking lead always. Second time, if somebody's speaking for too long, you do have to interrupt. That's like a more higher level of intervention. And then third level, if somebody is really not complying with all that, as Jack said, you can, at least in Zoom calls, you can directly message that person. And if it gets too out of hand, hopefully, which never happens, you can kick that person out. So there are level of interventions, but normally you want to be as polite because you want the experience to be positive.
You don't want to make the experience for the rest of the group kind of take a bit of a turn for the worse, right?
Don't muddy the waters. And so it's like an art. That's why I think for a moderator, it's very important they have that, that they have those social skills, Even if you are intervening, there's different ways. Somebody can say, hey, what do you think about it? You can come across rude. You can say, oh, that's great, I agree with you. But let's say what, this person thinks about it. So, I mean, that kind of, you have to keep things light, It's not a boot camp, it's a focus group.
Something that came to mind there as you were discussing that was a couple of the offsites that we've done as a group, where we'll actually start off the whole thing with an exercise that would be kind of similar to what you would have done in like maybe a drama camp or in like some type of summer camp, where yeah, you play a game or get people to like draw on a whiteboard or something like that. Out of curiosity, is that something that you ever tried or implied in a focus group?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Jack. So I think I call them energizers because I've
Yeah.
used them a lot in design thinking workshops. And the idea is just that break the ice, because remember
Yeah.
that is also new, so
Yeah, they don't know each other.
flexibility is
Yeah.
really required. Yeah. So for live, or let's say offsite, on-site, off-site, however you want to say that. Yeah, I think it works very well because, people can see everyone. And I've used them in virtual workshops in design thinking. But yeah, hearing you, I think it's a very good idea, but only thing you have to keep in mind is, if you have a very tight window, and in Zoom, usually you have to be prepared 10, 15 minutes because everybody might not come up on time because people are on different time zones. If they come in, either their audio is not working or video is not working. So I think I agree with Jack. We should have some kind of icebreaker activity. Usually, so just like as I'm recalling, usually what we do is we bundle it with introductions. For example, if I'm recalling, if I've asked, got people from, who play 2-3 different genre of games or a particular game, you would ask them, what's your name and which is your favorite character and why is it your favorite character? So you definitely want to break that ice so that people don't feel that they're there for an interview, but make sure that it's still in the time window. But I heavily recommend, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, and also something I suppose that doesn't put them on the spot too much. I do remember I had to redesign the company logo in 15 seconds before on a whiteboard, and that was a rather challenging one of those. Yeah, cool. All right, so we spoke a little bit about that intro and keeping things light. I suppose another thing to remember when those Zoom ones are happening, or even when they're happening in person, like there can be that kind of secret window where the other stakeholders are having a look in from, right?
Yeah. So I think for the offsite ones, definitely, there's a whole lot more setup. Usually, if you are conducting it, it's the way I have done it is, and obviously the best practices are you go to a research facility. You never do it in your studio because you're not seeing players. And research facilities are pretty well equipped. They have cameras, and then there's another room where on monitors, people are looking at things. They can always message the moderator. For the Zoom versions or, online versions that I've done, we can do that. Like you invite your stakeholders, but again, limit the group because keep in mind that, if you have already 8 people on the call and then you have 6 more, the group becomes too big, right? Plus one other technique that we learned after doing so we started with pilots, we did one pilot version and then we are like, we have these, by mistake, one of the moderators didn't realize that the stakeholder was not a participant because they had their photo, a very different photo in social setting, which probably they didn't use every day. And it's possible moderator might not know that stakeholder. So they asked the stakeholder. So this is a real, like, so John, what do you think about it? And silence from John. And this guy is like, okay, John, bit more persistence. What do you think? John again. John. Sorry, I'm one of the participants. I'm just here as an observer. So,
Lord.
So you want to avoid those group movements, but again, I think that's the way you learn. So what we did was we created a very default, grayed out, generic person icon portrait, and we told every stakeholder that you have to upload that into your, your, as a profile image. So then it became very clear, and don't have your names and all, anything on that which can be distracting. So it made it very clear for the moderator, and the group also felt much, because the portraits were not noticeable. Yeah, so I would go over it that way.
Another thing I know some folks do is have all of the observers join in like one call from Zoom as opposed to having like 8 other ones. And like if you don't have access to the fancy research facility or even tools like Zoom, there are free tools as well, right? I know Zoom gets a bit funky once you get into like having more than 3 or 4 people in it. So want to give Discord a big shout out there. That's huge with a lot of smaller developers I've found. And Discord has a whole bunch of features. Even like you can actually do the whole you can play like little games in it as a starter set. I suppose the problem with Discord is not everyone has it, and it can be a little bit finicky to set it up and add people to things. But yeah, you don't need the enterprise solutions to get feedback like this from players.
Yeah. That's, I think, a very good call. What is important here is, you should have a decent, whether it's free or paid, a decent quality tool, but more importantly, get the basics right. Like just for the Zoom calls or online version, we had another, just to simulate, the offsite version, we had a Slack channel or Messenger going on. You definitely don't want to message in the same, kind of
the same chat
tool, because you might just accidentally remember that, you're talking to people. Yeah. And I always recommend having a second facilitator, especially in online version, because what happens is sometimes your call might drop. Something might happen, some emergency you have to take care of, your dog is barking or your wife is
Wi-Fi goes down.
So I think backup is good, because if you drop, and that has also happened, but thankfully we had a second person who was actually taking the notes, and he could drive, because that person and you have the access to, the brief where you ask questions from. So I think that works. And for the observer group, we have a Slack or any messenger tool going on, where on the fly, if a participant answers something which is very interesting, and they're like, can you ask this person to elaborate on it? Or this seems like an interesting theme, and they want to diverge from the original script because it's interesting, you can do it on the fly. And that's the beauty of, focus group over techniques like survey in this case.
Cool. Yeah. And it's so much easier to tell a story when you hear a story from someone, as opposed to having something come from a survey. And I'm intrinsically aware of how much more value that has when the stakeholder is there at the time it happens, right? When the stakeholder sees the player, the words come out of their mouth. It adds so much more value and has a lot more impact then. And to kind of take that thought on a little bit, could you tell me a little bit more about how you've seen focus groups influence decision making?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jack. I think, I mean, ROI of, UX, ROI of UR, these are questions which are very hot topics,
exactly.
How do you measure? So for me, luckily, the kinds I have done, other than one which received lukewarm response, because many times, and I'll tell you why, so I think it's very important before you do a focus group, you first, when a stakeholder comes to you, let's say you are, leading the user research or UX in your company, and a stakeholder, whoever it is, most probably a product manager or a director or even a marketing person, they come to you, they'll describe what their problem is. And that's where you have to define, hey, and most of the time what happens, they come with, can we do a usability testing or a player interview? And I'm like, why do you want to do that? What's your objective here? And they'll say, we want to learn this. And what is your deadline? This. And what is your budget? So first thing is, understand what the problem is, what the objective is, and then tell them. So what I try to tell them is, hey, don't worry about the method right now. Tell me what your budget is, what your objective is, what your timeline is. And then we'll pick from our gamut of method, which is best suited for you. So I think expectation setting is very important. So what at least I do, and I'm sure, most folks out there do, is set an expectation, what you want to get out of it. So I from my experience with one which received a lukewarm response, I always tell them, guys, you might get feedback which is redundant, which what I meant is you will already know about it, so don't worry about it, because that's another layer of validation. And as much as we want to avoid it, that's why I think it's very important to work with your stakeholders on a script. That's where you are starting with a script. And the script has like how we're going to conduct it, but more importantly, what questions you want answered, which you don't know, so that we can drive the focus group in that. Because, for example, if people say, I don't like the game because it's so busy, it's so buggy, the loading time takes too long. And stakeholder like, we know that we have technical debt. So you want to steer the conversation away from that. So what I'm saying is, the more pre-work that happens, because remember, stakeholders are also, they're as important to me as my, users I'm inviting. So one way to remedy that is, Jack, like upfront making clear what the expectations are, what kind of questions they want, which direction we want focus group to go into. And then what stuff comes out live, and the surprise elements, which they say, we never even thought about it. So a couple of instances like I can tell you is, there have been product lines or game ideas that have been cancelled based on focus group. There have been features which stakeholders were like, we need to do it because X and Y game does it, and we know they have 30% higher revenue. Will it translate to mobile? Without being specific, they had strong convictions. But when we got audiences who played that, let's say, console game, and a mobile audience which played somewhat similar game, they were like polarized. And the stakeholders saw, like you said, it's different when you create a report because, conviction rate is low.
Really easy to discount it then, right? Yeah.
And if you're conducting the focus group right, I mean, you see actual emotions coming out of these players, and nothing convinces people more than that. So I think they have been successful in that. There are times like stakeholders have found a line of thought. So one is, and I have in my experience gone as far as even running them through an outline of a project. Even if the product is not there, would you like a game which had features similar to what you're playing, but it had added this meta on the top? Because we know a lot of meta matching happen nowadays. There are times when for artwork validation, you have shown players, hey, would you do this art? And again, we saw very interesting, either unanimous decisions or polarizing, which can be fodder for either resolving the issue you have at hand now, or even front loading more user techniques with wider sample sizes. And some of them are really about surprise stuff, which neither I can anticipate as a moderator, neither the team. But when they hear about it from the players, it's like a windfall game. Oh, we never thought of it. So it's effective. Given that, Jack, like expectations have been set clear. And the brief.
That's cool. And then a lot of what comes out of a focus group, as you mentioned there, can be a catalyst for more research to happen, and probably should be in a lot of regards as well, right? It's not they're not a one-stop shop at all. They're a great step just before some pretty serious quant work to start happening, right? With surveys and other tools like that.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a stepping stone. It's not the holy grail, but and many times you will be questioned. Like the higher up the report goes, they're like, okay, what is these insights are good, but like, what are you basing it on? We have and it's fair, right? If you have a game with a user base of, let's say, nowadays it's common 20, 30, 40 million, or DAU of, upward of 5 million. And you're saying, okay, this is what 8 players. So, that doesn't weighs in. But here is the thing, my understanding, that's why I'm saying what is very important is the quality of recruiting. You are not getting players who are either lapsed players, all of them. That diverse mix is important, or they are ones who are just, high spenders or most engaged players. Because coming from psychology, and you can agree and disagree, probably more about it than me, Jack. From my understanding is, again, based on my economics and research background, human behavior is one of those things which follow a normal bell curve distribution. What that really means is, once we know the archetypes, what we can say is true to an extent for, identified set of cohort will be true, because that's how it's very predictable. It's a bell curve distribution rather than something very random. It's not that individuals in their behavior and attributes vary, very drastically. Of course, everybody's different. But what I'm saying is, if you're able to find the right candidates, you will have some sense of, okay, even if it's something which opens more questions, it is good. You don't need to make a decision on that, but you are, rather than having no idea of what, your players or users think, you now have something, and now you can A/B test, design, qual techniques to go further along that route.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. All right. Well, I suppose just to maybe finish us off, we spoke really briefly about how things got different when COVID hit, right? And it might be worth just exploring that for a couple of minutes, and the total remote stuff that you would have done. And then after that, I think we'll be all finished. But let's start on that one.
Sure, that's a good one, Jack. And I mean, I'm sure many of you have, gone through the same adaptation that I'm going to talk about now. Earlier we were used to having, most companies had their labs. We were like, the lab is recruiting everyone, and they would record stuff for us, even if you're in a different time zone. But suddenly there is no. And again, what happened even in the last company that I worked, a last two companies, I was handling teams remotely. I'm sure which is true of many of you. So not only the team was not in the same room, everybody was distributed across geographies. So then we were like, and how could we test up prototypes? For me, the problem started with complex features. We want to test design prototypes. How do we do that? Before proceeding to code. So we started testing out with Zoom. We did internal pilots with like people from different departments, marketing, who had nothing to do with our game. It worked. Then we tweaked it, and then we went with players, for our games from our community channels. And then we finally, started working with companies like PlaytestCloud to get, players or competitor game players. And by that time, we were in a solid place. I think the transition it has pros and cons. The pros are like, you can actually pretty much get people from anywhere, So for example, nowadays, as you know, games are launched in tier 1 countries. There's North America, Canada, and before that, if you want to test something, you go to tier 2 countries, maybe somewhere in Europe or Australia. So one advantage I see is like you can get people from pretty much anywhere, in one call, which is not possible or offline, sorry. And it does mean as a con a bit of juggling the time zone. Sometimes the moderator has to get up at 4 a.m. It's what it happens. And we were happy to comp off them. I myself got either, taking something, finding a right time zone between East and West, it could be a odd thing, but it's rewarding exercise on its own. I would say, so those are the pros. So you can get people. It works out much cheaper, in a way, because setup is online. You are probably using tools that your company already has. And the vetting process itself, all that is probably, that's what I'm saying, handled by your third-party partner, company like PlaytestCloud or whoever you're working with. So you don't have those issues. And I think it works, but logistics is something you have to keep, control of. And the fact that technology can backfire. For example, for a usability test, we once had a person turn up on their mobile phone. So, or if it was a desktop prototype, it was hard to translate it to mobile. You have to anticipate all that. But I would say fair. I think from my experience, it works. And it also helps with getting the budget or cost down, which is what is kind of a deciding factor for these kind of, studies and studios.
And also the time budget, a lot as well, right? You don't need to spend half the day in the lab or getting to the lab as well. On your point there about change, everyone being in a different time zone, that's something that I had to learn a lot. I work with people all over the world, and something that I explain to people when they start at PlaytestCloud now is, you might be talking to somebody at 7 o'clock in the morning their time, and you have 5 p.m. brain. We're at different parts of the day. It's always something to keep in mind. I think that's everything then. That was a great conversation, and hopefully we get you back on again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jack. It was really interesting, and very happy to share my experience. Hopefully, what we spoke about today and your experience. Hopefully, it's useful for people. And job done. That was really great.